I guess I got too much time to think. I don't know. Well, I really don't have much time, but I was thinking today about a few opportunities I had in my life that could have went good, but they didn't. And then I got to thinking, well, if you hadn't have done this, you couldn't be where you are now. And I'll get into what I'm talking about. I would say the first, you take many jobs during your lifetime. It could be different things. Sometimes you just take a job because you need a job. You may not necessarily know how to do that job, but they're willing to train you. And you get in there and you see that you don't like it, or maybe you like it. And whether you stick with it or not, it's something that you will probably never forget for your entire life. It'll be a skill, depending on how long you work there, a skill that you will always know. And I've had several of those, and I never really thought about it. But sometimes all these little jobs and these skills you learn kind of fit together, and in the end were a good thing that you did. If that make any sense, I don't know. I'll just tell the story, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. So I guess one of the, I always worked in the I worked newspaper, journeyman press operator for major newspapers. I also worked at smaller newspapers. I also worked on presses in commercial printing. Many of these places, whether it's newspapers or commercial printing, they'll use the same press. I ran what was called a web press. It had big giant rolls of paper, and the paper would weave through the presses and pick up various colors and the black and white. It's going to rain any time now, so we got to get this going. But that was one trade that I had. I had a 4-year apprenticeship program. Actually, I learned the trade outside of the union, and then when I joined union shops, they put you through, you have to do the apprenticeship for 4 years. And anyway, did that for a long time. Before that, I did cultured marble. We made sinks, shower pans, shower panels. So I would go to new construction and install bathtubs, sinks, the walls for the showers. You'd put the soap dishes in, and then I also worked inside those shops making the product. I learned a lot of different skills doing this marble, and I probably did that at least probably 10 years or so, full time. You learn how to use hand tools, grinders, buffers, yes, a lot of different, and you also learn carpentry skills because you're cutting the marble to fit. So you need to know some basic carpentry. So that was another skill that I had picked up along the way. And then working in various factories. I even worked when I was a teenager, worked in fast food. The things I picked up in the military. And some of the things that I did, became a skill, a valuable skill for the next job that I might take. But not so much working for a company, but I started my own computer business back at, about the year 2000. I worked for a newspaper, Charles City, Iowa. I worked up there. I worked for the newspaper. We would go in at 4 in the morning and we'd be out of there before noon. So I had a lot of time. For a while, there was a bar across the street, and I would bartend. I actually went to a bartending academy a few years before that, learned how to bartend. I should have already known because I was in a bar long enough to memorize every drink that was ever made. But I went to bartending academy. I worked in the bars in Cleveland, Ohio. I worked in a few other states. The idea was that I was going to go to Vegas and be a bartender, but that never panned out. So anyway, that's one of the other skills. So I would get off work at the newspaper, go over to the bar and work a shift over there till about 7 or 8, and then do it every day. But then I got bored with that, the bartending. That wasn't, that was pretty rough. Getting up in the morning, I'd have to get up at 3 in the morning, be at the newspaper, and sometimes you'd hang out and have a few drinks. Not real easy, and the dogs got to bark. So I decided I would start my own computer repair company. And I put an ad in the paper I worked for, and I started getting calls. And what I would do would go out to these farmhouses. It was farmhouses most of the time, but in the city there, I would get a lot of calls, and I'd just go to these people's houses, and most of the time, they had downloaded a virus or something quit working, they needed a fan, maybe their hard drive was going out, and I'd fix their computer. Most times, I could fix whatever the problem was within a half an hour to an hour, and walk out of there with a $100 bill. That business really, really took off. And I opened a brick and mortar shop across the street from the newspaper, and where I would do computer repair for the ones that I'd have to take home. Before that, I was doing them in the basement of my home. Well, during that time, my marriage was not going well, and I had to get out of the marriage, and So I ended up closing up the business, which was growing quickly. And I left, moved to Kentucky, and I never pursued that again until a few years later. Me and my brother opened up a store in Minnesota doing eBay sales. What we would do, there was a fad going on. People would bring us their items, and we would list them on eBay. We had an actual brick and mortar location, and let me tell you, that really took off quick. There just wasn't much profit in it. Now, I was also working nights at St. Paul Pioneer Press at the newspaper, making excellent money. And there just wasn't much profit in it. And there was a lot of work. But we had the business, but it just wasn't, and that's why there are no shops like that anymore. There was one that kind of went national, and it didn't work out, but I could use the computer skills doing that. So I learned a lot about doing eBay in the year that we had that store. And I learned a lot about antiques. I learned, somebody would bring in a set of dishes, antique dishes, and I'd look at the maker's mark, and I could tell you if it was valuable. I could still do this. And I learned eBay very well, which is a skill that came in later. Knowing the antiques, knowing how to sell on eBay and doing it the right way, that came into handy later on when I moved here, because soon after I got here, I went to work for a ranch, something I had never done, and within a few months of starting there, I got injured very bad, and so I had to take a job at a pawn shop. Never worked at a pawn shop, but he wanted a guy that could list all the items that that people never picked up, the pawns, on eBay. Video games, computers, and so I took a job doing that, selling things on eBay for the pawn shop, and we made a lot of money doing that, and it was going very, very well. And I just took the skill that I already had, and a lot of the same things that people would bring us, you would get into the pawn shop. But on top of that, when people would bring things in to pawn, we had it was a wider variety of things we could now accept, because I could look on eBay. That's how a lot of pawn shops see the value of something is. They just look it up on eBay. But there were certain things that they didn't know about that I knew about from working the store that we had in Minnesota. There's a lot of glassware that's very valuable. You just got to know what you're looking for. I would even go to garage sales and find this stuff and put it on eBay if I knew it would sell. If you know eBay and you know what sells on eBay, that is a good way to make extra money. Go to garage sales, flea markets. Flea markets, a lot of these people do know what they have, and so you're not going to buy anything cheap. But garage sales, a lot of them don't. But that's how some of the skills you learn along the way will help you out later in life. And of course, working there, now I'd worked there 6 years, and then I went back to work at the same ranch where I hurt myself. And I spent the next 5 years there, or 4 or 5 years. And now I do YouTube, which my computer skills help with. So you never know what some of the things you've done in your lifetime are going to pay off later. You may need that skill of that one job you hated, but you stuck it out for 6 months. You may need that skill later. You might get hurt, and that's one skill that you can use that you know that will help you later on. So I see nothing wrong, and I worked a lot of jobs, guys, especially with the newspaper business. You could get a job anywhere you wanted, and I liked traveling around. I didn't like sticking anywhere very long. I got bored of some, winter started coming in a cold place, I'd look for a new job, and I'd move somewhere warm. You could always get a job, and then the printing trade started to die. Not so much printing trade, but the newspapers. Nobody gets newspapers anymore. Almost all your big city newspapers are going under now. But I had these other skills that I've learned that I could use. And so it doesn't hurt. You can tell young people, hey man, if you don't like that job, find something else, but retain what you learn there. Because you never know one day when you might need that, or you might have to recall that information. Now today, a lot of the jobs are not so hands-on, but computer skills, anything you can learn is always handy. And the way I learned, me and my brother in 1998 bought these 386 computers out of the newspaper ad. Somebody was selling them. I think we paid $100 a piece. He got one, I got one. Man, we crashed them computers every half hour. So whatever we was doing, we was messing them up. And the way me and him both learned computers was we screwed them up all the time. We were on the phone with support. Back then, you could call Dell or any of them, and they'd give you free support. And that's how we learned. We learned how to replace everything inside. I've even built my own computers many times. You just start with the motherboard, and most of the time, and when I was doing it for a living or as a side job, I would have so many spare parts, I could just look around and grab a case, grab a motherboard. I could build computers just from looking at from all the parts I had. So those are good skills to have. So the point of the video is, you may think you wasted a good part of your life working at a certain job, but you might still need that skill, and it still might help you later on in life. So any knowledge gained is not knowledge wasted. Thanks, big loud truck. I guess that's it. I don't even know if you guys even got this video, but that's the point. Never be afraid to learn something, and never be afraid to quit if you don't like it, but retain that knowledge that you once learned. You don't usually forget things like that. There are some horror jobs I've had. I've made some videos on that, but that's not what this video is. Thanks for watching. Happy trails.